privacy, technology, and cookies. I'm your host, Pilvi Alopaeus, and I have here with me today the amazing, fantastic, one-of-a-kind co-host Hannes, the Hannes Saarinen. Hi, Hannes.
Hello. Oh, nice to meet you. Nice to speak to you.
It's been a while. We have been in a little break in our English podcast, but not to worry, we are still alive and very much kicking. And today we have a very, very special episode for you. We will take a careful look at one of the largest data breaches in Finland, where the attacker was able to access the network drive of the City of Helsinki, personal data of 300,000 people living or, for example, going to school in Helsinki. Therefore, with us here today, we have none other than Mr. Mikael Hitruhin. I love that. Good me. Data protection lawyer at the City of Helsinki, who has been working very closely with this case. Hi, Mr. Mikael.
Hello. Nice to be here, even though the subject is a bit unfortunate.
It is, but as a privacy lawyer, this is an extremely interesting subject, and I'm sure this conversation will be amazing, and it has surely been interesting for you to work in this case. But before we go into this, I want to hear, how are you guys doing? How are you doing, Mikael? How has life been?
Well, last weekend and last 4 days, I was at Spiel convention and I shipped to Finland approximately 30 kilos of board games. So I'll be playing a lot and life is smiling. Now, the only thing I'm lacking is time to enjoy all the board games I have acquired through the years, but as a lawyer, that's a choice.
It's a choice, but board games are amazing. So we're so happy for you. What about Hannes? Have you been playing games?
Not recently, and in generally being a Finn, I'll give you an honest answer. So I had a very nice weekend with sauna and all, and all the way until the start of this morning, when I have had the busiest workday imaginable prior to this one. So, but this is an extremely good sort of let's say break on looking at what's taking place somewhere else in the past than all of the huff and puff which is taking place in the own organization, all of the interesting stuff taking place there.
Ooh, that's cool. And I just came back from London. I was there for like 4 days. I used to live there, so it was very fun to be just walking around. And I was hanging with one of my greatest friends, who is an amazing lawyer working in kind of financial technology, blockchain stuff that I have never worked with in that area, but it was amazing to listen to it and understand what she does. And I'm just in awe of these people making the world future look different.
I'm actually surprised that the blockchain is still a thing. I was thinking that, it was because no one thought of any practical use for it. It would have been gone and gone.
Oh, well, you should check, for example, there's a Finnish startup called Aave that is one of the most greatest one. They're doing beautiful things. I always have to advertise some Finnish companies, so go and check it out.
I won't.
You're like, blockchain is dead. No one cares.
Yes. Blockchain is bad.
Wow. Bold opinions right there.
That was, I love. What about you, Mikael? Do you think blockchain is dead and bad and we shouldn't have it?
Well, the practical uses haven't been as stunning as were promised, but maybe it will find something more than niche use eventually.
Oh, it will. It will. I'm completely convinced after this about a week. I'm like, oh, this was beautiful. But we have more interesting stuff for privacy people today, because the blockchain is not maybe the most interesting discussion at the moment from the privacy point of view, but we have some serious stuff. So let's take a little break and then let's go deep into today's topic. Tirulirulei. And tirulirulei, we are back from the break. And before we go in, we have to be a little bit boring lawyers and have a little disclaimer moment. This is a live show. Basically, it's not a live show, but we're just too bored to edit it. There may be some mistakes because we don't always have time to check everything. If you hear clack, 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 that's us Googling, but usually we don't have time for that. This podcast is not legal advice, and we don't represent our employers. This is just chatting about privacy. So, today, as I mentioned, we have someone very special here. Mikael is very well known for our Finnish listeners and the privacy folks. You are one of the most active voices in the Finnish privacy community, and I think everyone follows your LinkedIn posts, and you go speak a lot about, for example, what we're going to talk about today. But our English listeners have not heard you yet because you have not been in our English podcast. You have been a few times in our Finnish podcast, but would you like to introduce yourself to our English listeners so they will fall in love with you as well?
No, I'm from Finland. We don't do that. But if I must, then I will. So my name is Mikael Hitruhin. I've worked for the City of Helsinki Education Division for 3 years now as a data protection lawyer. It has been ups and downs, and the most remarkable down is the one we'll be discussing in this episode, the data breach of City of Helsinki. And yeah, a lot to share, a lot of important information, and we also have a very special safety investigation authority report on the findings of that breach. So we have a lot to cover.
Absolutely. And if you are a Finnish speaker and do not follow Mikael already, go and follow him. You won't disappoint. You won't be disappointed.
And now I need to pump up some English content as well. Thanks, Pilvi.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely. Throw your hat over the fence and now you have to follow. But Hannes, lead the way.
Yes, so let's head off to City of Helsinki data breach, especially in the sort of area of education and sort of, how do you call it? Well, the childcare, probably in my clumsy English. So, what's the fuss about? Mikael, would you actually please sort of elaborate us what has taken place? Why are we having this call?
Well, last year, in the eve of 1st of May, I was happily quitting my workday and going for the 1st of May parades and vacations. But little did I know that on that day, the data breach on the city had been discovered. And oh boy, around approximately 300,000 people were impacted. These are approximates given by the Safety Investigation Authority, who published a report on it. And they also gave an approximate number of documents involved. 750,000 documents, 2 terabytes of data that was received by an unknown attacker. So when after the 1st of May celebrations I came to work, there was a so-called situation ongoing, and I had to step up and start doing some privacy work on that matter. And that's basically the short time frame of it. The investigation authority report later gave some clarification that the attack already started on 25th of April and lasted for approximately 5 days until it was discovered. And even though the attacker had stayed in the systems for a while, after they were found, we managed to cut them out, and it seems that no further damage was done. So at least there is a silver lining in that.
Yeah. How would you, for the people who haven't heard about this case previously, how would you categorize the nature of the database which was breached, and what was actually what was the catch? So, what kind of data of citizens of Helsinki was exposed to the attackers?
The data was the hard disks of the system where people were saving all kinds of information, kind of the workspaces where people used for storage. And these joint workspaces contained data of students, for example, when teachers wanted to save data, not physically on their computers, but on the desks, well, disks. And this data could have been, for example, exam results or some other notes on students or information about allergies of students. And of course, it's not only limited to schools, it's also kindergartens, the administration, vocational training, all kinds of stuff. And after the main problem was that the data was stored from period of many, many years. These data disks are old. And as such, at this time of the breach, we couldn't tell what was actually gone for the attacker.
Okay, so it's already this being already a good pointer. Don't recall what was the how it was with the city of Helsinki, but it's a good idea to sort of pay attention to data retention, because as the prior chairwoman of the FTC once said, that sort of if you delete your data once you no longer use it, it can no longer be stolen. So I don't actually know if this is the case of what percentage of the data on the shared drive was sort of something which shouldn't have been there already. But to be fair, these are the, when you think about all of the personal data processed in the organization, it's kind of inevitable that all of that just can't be in a structured format. Almost no one has sort of the IT systems for each and every piece of data which has to be managed, handled, or processed over the course of the organization's activities. Uh, so we have to help us understand what has taken place. There was a specific investigation committee who actually have created an almost 100-page report of what has taken place and how because obviously this event had a significant public clout. So, Mikael, would you please summarize us kind of the key points of this report, especially on sort of how was this possible, and anything else you want to raise on? Well, let's go to the specific findings later, but how was this possible for the breach to take place?
Well, it was a combination of many factors, and they are luckily quite well listed in the data investigation report. And it all started when some username password combinations of students were scraped from dark web, and those credentials were then used to log into the systems. And then through some still unknown procedure, the attacker managed to upgrade the access rights of those credentials for management level. And after that, they gained wider access than was intended in the systems. And there were many points where this breach could have been stopped, and it required quite many points to line up with the interests of the attacker for the breach to actually succeed. So I think this method of entry highlights that even small things, if they are blocked, or if one thing doesn't line in the way of the attacker, the whole breach might be stopped. And it kind of terrifies me to think about how many breaches in the world have been stopped by one thing not going in the way of the attacker.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know how it translates, but there is this sort of the is it emmental juusto, kind of the emmental cheese comparison, at least in Finnish language, which is speaking about information security in a manner that sort of there are these holes in cheeses, in the cheese, and where the attacker is trying to get through, and every now and then all of those holes are perfectly lined up so that they will go through every layer of the cheese, and in that case you are breached. And this here we have a case where the holes in the cheese have been lined up perfectly from the attacker's sense, and not so well from the perspective of the defense. Do you have anything else you would like to anything special in this case you would like to highlight?
Well, there is one thing that confuses many Finnish people on the legal nature of the report. And well, if it confuses us Finnish people, then it might confuse our English listeners as well. So let's put a disclaimer. This report is only for informative purposes. It's so that future tragedies like this data breach can be avoided. This document is not trying to find the victims, and it's not official police investigation that's supposed to find the perpetrator of the crime. It's purely made for informative purposes and to give recommendations on how to change or government organizational work and collaboration between organizations to prevent data breaches in the future.
Yeah, I have to say, as the privacy slash security lawyer, that I'm actually really happy that this report has taken place, because and it has been drafted, because it includes a step-by-step listing of how the breach has taken place, where you can actually, where every reader can kind of think about, this is where probably the defender went wrong, and whether they could also think that, okay, if this would take place in our organization, then how would we be able to manage it? As I'm reading ideally, when you think about the protecting your data and organization against the breaches, ideally you want to prevent so that the attackers are not able to intrude in the first place. Of course, it's partially with the amount of vulnerabilities and updates, it's kind of whack-a-mouse thingy if you can keep your infrastructure in a shape that it doesn't have any root inside. And but presuming that you kind of miss a step at some point of this whack-a-mouse game you're playing with your infrastructure, then you want to have the capability to detect these events, and you also want to have the capability of the information of suspicious events being sort of notified by someone and taking the appropriate actions. And at least for me, which is the big issue here, which would have probably lessened the impact of the breach significantly, is that if the SOC people in the play would have been able, and the IT departments, if they would have been first getting an early warning that now our system is being scanned aggressively, and also then the information would have gone to applicable or the right people. This actually reminding me of the other case currently raising awareness in the Finnish data protection community, that of sort of the S-Pankki breach, of which we had a verdict, which also had a case that there was a vulnerability, and then there was sort of an individual who was calling into the customer service of the pankki. But again, in this case, the information didn't go through all the way to the people who would have been in charge of the reactiveness. So it's not enough that you have the good deep walls. You also need to have someone sounding the alarm when those walls are breached.
Yes, and if we look at the walls, those need to be intact, but they aren't always intact. They must be monitored. And if we go beyond that to the treasury room where the data is, the data also must be stored properly. Like, as you said before, if something is old and not needed, if you delete it, at least it cannot be stolen. So there are like multiple layers of protection and care and the technical and organizational measures needed to uphold this strategic picture where like each layer gives additional protection and minimizes risks. It is something that needs to be maintained properly. And in this case, as the report showed, the holes in the so-called cheese just happened to line up perfectly.
So this kind of fleshed it out why it's important to follow all the steps that we have to follow. So if there's ever any more who is saying that, oh, I don't want to do it, why do we need to do it? Well, there's a point in all of this. But I want to ask the question I think everyone is wondering. Do we know who is the attacker? Was it state? Was it private? Do we know anything about it? Is there anything you can tell us about it? And who is investigating? Is this now on the hands of the police? How is it working out?
The investigation on that matter is in the hands of the police, and currently we, as an organization, have no idea about what kind of a entity has taken the data. Police might eventually give some sort of a statement on the matter if they have some leads. Of course, it's very hard to say what type of an attacker it would be. It could be individual or a group trying to ransom the data for some use, but we can also think about possible state entities or actors who would love to destabilize these European natures for one reason or another. Well, it's very speculative right now.
Yeah, of course. And as you said, as our president says, that we have a very good security in Finland, and it's not because of Stockholm. But I just had to get it in. I'm a big Alexander Stubb fan, so I had to get it in. But yeah, that's very interesting. I'm also interested to know because as a professional, it's such a rare thing to have a situation like this in your hands, and of course it's devastating and horrible for the people. But what was it like for you as a professional? What was it like to go through all this? What was the team like, and what did you learn?
Well, it was exciting. Well, the worst thing is that after the data breach, workdays have felt quite boring, but maybe that's just me issue on that matter. But yeah, this is definitely not something that happens each day. And what I said to myself that, well, if you are a data protection lawyer and the biggest data breach happens on your watch, then it's kind of your choice of profession. Now you are quite overworked and that cannot be helped with. So I was, of course, I understand the situation was dire, but I wanted to keep a calm professional situation and composure by myself, because if I, as a data protection lawyer, start panicking in the organization, then everyone else will panic as well. So it was kind of a combination of excitement and call to action that now we need to do something, and the role of staying calm and kind of leading the way in terms of how the privacy questions will be addressed in this matter.
That's kind of like the being a police or a fireman, that if everything is going extremely well in society, then you do most likely may have a really dull job. But then if something goes wrong, then you have fun sorting it out, but with the fact that then it's going to cost some people something, because sort of things are going to get broken typically when things are going sour.
Exactly. And always in crisis, it's the best. Stay Frosty. It's from an old TV show that I just rewatched. It's a good thing. Stay Frosty. Uh, okay, so I'm also interested. What was the team like? Now you of course you create the task force really quickly, and we have had a few communication specialists as a guest, and we have been in the Finnish side. We have been talking about the meaning of having a communication specialist in data breach situation. But who was in the team? Can you share us? Not obviously the persons, but what type of professionals did you have working on it?
Well, I've kind of divided this to certain groups of people. One of the groups is like the cybersecurity and data infrastructure. That's where it kind of begins. Then it is data protection. That's the team where I was. And then other teams include communications, a very, very important team, not only for the breach, but for crisis management overall. Then there was the HR and personnel, because an event of this scale will have an impact on how work can be done. We had to close the drives that were used, for example, and as such, there were many impediments to day-to-day work that had to be taken into account. And there was also the leadership and information flow. We are a big organization. It's a City of Helsinki with central administration. Then we have the education division where the breach happened. There are like multiple levels of leadership in the organization chart. So having information go from one department or division to another was very crucial for the management of the breach. But I think what really is important is the day-to-day communication and work with these teams so that the situation remains updated, so that everyone knows what is happening. For example, the communication between data protection and communication played out quite well in informing the public on the breach. And on that, we had to make day-to-day assessments on, has the situation changed? If it has, how do we inform it to the public? And especially at the beginning when the breach happened and we didn't know specifically what data was attacked at that stage, and it is still unclear on what is exactly the documents that were stolen. Even the Safety Investigation Authority couldn't find the specific documents that were stolen. That's why we have only approximates. But with that level of unknown, we had to do these day-to-day briefings on where do we go now.
Yeah.
And I think one of the very crucial lessons in this is being aware of what you know and being aware of what you do not know, and then understanding what is the data or information about the breach that you will likely get to know, and how do you act on when you get new information.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny how at the end of the day, especially when being a professional in these kind of cases, then it's less about knowing what the law says. The law is actually pretty straightforward, but it's more about sort of the keeping your cool when it's sort of chaotic, and then also sort of the communications, because especially in these cases, as Michael very well laid out. Sorry, Mikael. I keep thinking you in your name in English format.
Yeah, I need to rebrand myself for the English audience now.
Yeah. Michael Knight, that would have a nice ring to it.
The defender of data.
Yeah. Looking forward on besides your rebranding, but also sort of on this case, the on the communication side, of course, the public communications, City of Helsinki was pretty open about it at the very beginning, and as of today, the web pages of the City of Helsinki are pretty elaborate of what has taken place. Aside from that, now that we know the basics, and at least one item what I'm still looking forward to hearing is that what does the Finnish Data Protection Ombudsman say when they finally get this on their table from the police, and if they have, for example, are they going to have any emphasis on what should City of Helsinki have been doing better? Like if we take, for example, the aforementioned S-Pankki case, where they were sort of saying that, okay, this should have been, they were basically saying that the S-Bank should have been doing better testing. And if we take the Vastaamo case, the breach in the Finnish psychotherapy provider, they were very open, like, okay, this data should have been pseudonymized at least, in addition to the password security and overall information security activities. With the City of Helsinki, I'm looking with curiosity whether they sort of raise how much they are going to focus, like, was it okay that all of this data was there in a shape it was, that some of it probably old, or was it about how well the systems, the VPN routers or whatever VPN it was, that was not updated, or whether it should have the communications or the crisis management, or let's say the incident response procedures within the City of Helsinki. So it's interesting to see whether the Data Protection Ombudsman will give out any specific statements on those, especially because they don't have the capability to impose fines. In Finland, we have this nice practice that we don't want that we have excused the public authorities, such as our cities, from being subject to GDPR fines. So the city of the Data Protection Ombudsman's powers are a bit limited on this one. Since this is all in the past, they can probably only say that, give a stern warning in the spirit of don't do this again. But the monetary, there is not going to be a monetary consequences, at least in the perspective of GDPR fines. I don't actually, my dear co-hosts, can you think of any other vector where there might be monetary consequences to City of Helsinki?
I don't actually know. Of course, if there would be some, criminal things that they would need to pay out to the victims, or this type of things, but I don't think that there really is. Not at this level. What do you think, Mikael?
No, I can't really think of
No.
anything that would be systematically targeted for the city. But
Yeah.
what I do think I know is that I can know from the investigation report, I can say that on what points the Data Protection Authority will make comments that, yeah, this should not have happened, this should not have happened, this should not have happened. But I think there are still multiple points where I think the investigation authority and the Data Protection Ombudsman will be sympathetic for us. For example, the fact that the data accounts of 2 minors were scraped from dark web. Well, underage students, well, they need their credentials to use the school systems. For safety reasons, they cannot be open to anyone. But on the other hand, these minors will use same passwords and school emails for all kinds of dark predatory websites where their information can be stolen. So we are put in a position where we have to have accounts on these minors who cannot reliably be expected to use them securely. They are not some employees who we can uphold to a certain level that you need to take these trainings, you need to be reliable and not use same passwords. But how do you control it with underage children?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think a teacher can control a classroom of 30 people, so how do you control them on their free time not to use the data like that?
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the points where I think they will be sympathetic. And speaking of other kind of good things for us, the data breach was contained quite well. I mean, there were no backdoor accesses found after the breach was blocked. And from my perspective, I think the data access requests related to the breach were handled accordingly quite well. We had to set up separate forms for the data access requests because we didn't want any forms with open fields where people write what they want. Because if people would write freely, it would be confusion and chaos, and no one would really understand what the data breach victims or potential victims would be asking from us. Instead, we went for a form where you can only select that, well, this is the data I want, and it's about me or it's about my child. Of course, alongside this form, we had a traditional form with open fields so that no one's right to express how they want to ask the data is not breached, but this really streamlined the procedure. And last thing I want to say about the Data Investigation Authority report, it is a very conclusive report on what happened up to the breach, but I don't think it really highlighted that well the things that the city as an entity managed to handle well. It's more of a brings out those points where the city failed. And it is important to point out those things where the city did not live up to the standard. But if we are making an educational material that is meant to prevent these breaches from happening in the future, it is important to also highlight the areas where City of Helsinki was successful, because it's not a guarantee that when a next data breach happens on someone, they will succeed on the areas where Helsinki succeeded. And because of that, I think the report is not as conclusive as I hoped for, but still gives good guidance on how to resolve if a massive data breach hits your desk.
Do you think that if, and this might change now in the future, if there would be a threat of fines for public sector, do you think that would have helped? Do you think that would have had an impact how things would have been done?
Maybe, at least to some extent. Like, I think what Hannes said about the cheese theory, I don't think the fines would prevent all the holes from lining up and the perpetrator from making a successful crime. It's not something that the mere existence of GDPR fines would prevent. But I think it would have possibly created some sort of incentive to, for example, take care that all data is not stored. But it is, of course, speculative and hard to say what would happen if those
Yeah.
fines if there was a risk of fines. Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion around it, and one very impactful argument is that the leaders of public sectors, it might be hard for them to also understand the risk and the possible severeness of them, but money is something that everybody understands. It's a common language. If you lose X portion of your budget for fines, that changes things a lot. So, and that has been also the argument that these leaders would listen more the privacy and data protection professionals and prioritize it more. I'm not sure. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, of course, money does talk, and it gives a certain number to the risk. But I mean, would you want to be possible victim of a data breach even if there were no fines attributed to that breach? I don't really think so. Of course, it can affect the resources given for the data protection and data security, but I don't think it creates an additional desire to avoid the risks.
My take on that is that I don't know how effective it will be at the end of the day. Like, first of all, there is an interesting dichotomy in the public sector in Finland based on my personal experience. Some organizations, which obviously are not subject to fines, they are doing extremely diligent privacy work. They take their position as the civil servants who are enabling people's rights really seriously, in a way that they are really sort of there is this, I've seen it in multiple cases, this kind of privacy friendly attitude these people have who are operating on these sort of governmental positions or offices and sort of the different units. On the other hand, I keep hearing, at least in LinkedIn, all of these sort of complaints from the people who are operating as DPOs or equivalent on the public sector, and then complaining about the lack of resources. Now, the fines would enable probably sort of helping with their argumentation to the leadership, like, please give us more resources. But do those fines help enough? If you think about that, the public sector, it seems to be, in recent years, it has been a constant fight over sort of a distribution of meager resources they're getting from the state. So I don't really know if there is a huge amount of money floating around. And I would dare say that you will not be seeing, even if we have the fines on the public sector, in Finland, you will not see a similar awareness increase like what you saw in 2018 with the private sectors, when you suddenly had all of this budget for DPO wannabes and different legal units to sort of set up a GDPR compliant thing. Is then you're not going to have the similar surge in the public sector in Finland.
Yeah.
The way I think the responsible decision makers in organizations will stay responsible regardless of whether there are fines or risk of them or not. Those organizations with little money, they are more eager to take risks and cut corners regardless of whether there is a risk of fines or not. The question is whether this risk of fines will scare these risk-taking organizations to attend more resources to privacy. Well, maybe some of them are in a position where they can do that, but not all public organizations in Finland are well funded. So because of that, I'm skeptic whether it would help in the end or not.
That's a very lawyerist way of saying that not all public organizations are well funded.
That is, there's also 2 points in mind. One of the things is when I can't remember which of you said that it would help to have kind of price for the risk. And on the other hand, as everyone knows who has ever worked in privacy, that you always get the question, okay, how much would we have to pay? What would be the size of fine? And we don't have enough data still. No one can answer these things. It depends on so many things, and it's hard to put a price on the risks. And that is one of the reasons why the internal communication regarding it is difficult. But the other point that came to my mind is the sense of justice for the public. And from this point of view, it is a kind of punishment. It is a kind of public punishment to set fines. And I do think it has a meaning. It means something to people when they see, like, okay, they were punished for this, and there's not a feeling like, okay, they just run away with it and nobody cared, and they can just continue like they did, which is not true. We all know that that's not true. We all know that everybody's working really hard, but the sense of justice in the public, which also helps the trust towards public entities, which I think that in Finland is quite high. We trust our public entities quite a lot. And it is very important to have a healthy skepticism, but also a good trust. So yeah, that is
Yeah.
something in my mind as
And
well.
I think it's very important you brought the topic of trust. And it's very good that you brought it right after talking about the price tag, because not always the price is paid in money. You pay it in trust. For
Yeah.
example, the data breach of Vastaamo, well, after they tried to cover up the situation, all the trust towards that organization was gone. And from what I know, they went bankrupt, or at
Yeah.
least Vastaamo is not continuing as a business. So it can have a cost in the trust that will impact the future of the company or the organization. And
In this, yeah.
that's why I think it's very important to be transparent to build that trust. Like, I don't think one data breach is enough to undermine a trust. Like, feeling of safety is, well, it's not just absence of risks and dangers, but it's also a feeling. And well, data breach can undermine that feeling, but it will not destroy it. If you can communicate that, well, we have taken this into account, we have secured our systems, and this will not happen again. So one data breach does not break that trust. But if data breach happens and you just throw your hands around and say that, well, there's nothing we could have done and we are not treating this properly and someone else will fix this and will try to hide it up, in that case, the feeling of trust will be broken. So the way you respond to it might be more important for the trust between you and the people than the fact that you became the victim of a data breach.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, the good point is that the PR is usually the biggest price that you pay.
Mm.
It is the image and the lack of trust that public then has on you. Uh,
And, and it's
yeah,
also easy for City of Helsinki because they don't actually need my trust or our
yeah.
trust. They will still get the tax heroes regardless of our trust or not. I'm not going to move to City of Turku because of this breach.
Oh, never. Oh, English listeners, no. Helsinki people will do. Oh no, Turku is a
But,
second class city. No.
yeah,
Uh,
but even aside the trust, I like the point you made, Pilvi, about the
yeah,
justice being served. Because if
yeah.
we think for what else has taken place in the City of Helsinki, like they had this sort of huge mess up with the salary system of their employees recently.
Yes.
And there was also kind of this after report on that. And what was actually quite evident, and there was some public critique of the fact that the after report on that one was like sort of this just happened. Like the report when or whoever was investigating and making deductions within the city of Helsinki, they went to great pains of there not being anyone actually any specific fault why it took place, or at least on any possible individual, but it was like, okay, this just happened, let's go on. So one of the things, as you said, these fines might show that all of those people who might be losing their night's sleep or worse because of this breach, they will actually at least see that, okay, there has been some indication that this activity was punishable and the justice is served. If there are fines, then at least it's, as you said, it's at least an implication for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I fully agree with you in that, and uh, and it has also long-term effects for democracy as well. As you said that you cannot do anything. You're gonna move. You obviously are not gonna move to Turku, but what you can do is to vote differently. So City of Helsinki is also run democratically, so their democratic leadership. So if it would be worse enough, bad enough, we could always blame them. But I'm not sure how active the uh, voters are, and in this case, for example, I think it's a little bit too technical, and uh, I don't think the blame has gone to that far. People are not really demanding the heads of the leaders of Helsinki on spikes or anything like that.
I will choose who gets to have my vote in the next communal elections among those parties who were not in the sort of administration of City of Helsinki on this round. So
Uh,
it will be a much more interesting selection that way.
I will be voting whoever politician promises me the most resources.
I think, yeah. For me, my sister works in a healthcare in the city of Helsinki, so I always vote for anyone who makes their lives easier. So this is how we make our decisions in democratic way. But anything else in our mind? Is this our show today? I'm really pumped. We have such a good conversation today.
Well, I'm not sure if it was said out loud, but the law regarding the fines on public organizations might change
Yeah,
rather soon, actually.
yeah.
So there's being given a, how do they call it, legislative suggestion that from 1st of January 2027, the fines on public entities would be enforced under the GDPR in Finland as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to be interesting. Interesting to see how that's going to go and what effects will that have, especially how will the data protection folks working in public sector feel about this and how it will change things. But I think that was our show today. Please send us feedback and questions. Check out the contact details and links in the show notes. Subscribe to our amazing brand new YouTube channel and to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. I think we're everywhere at the moment, though. We don't have really links to everywhere because I don't even know where we are. So you get notifications of all the new episodes. And if you like us, if you like our episodes, the best way to support us is to, well, listen to us and also to buy us coffee through a link in the subscription box or however, the description box, whatever it is in YouTube. And give us at least 5-star in your podcast app. That would help us a lot. Thank you so much and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.